just before we start the examples, Peter, would be a great time if people have questions.
Okay.
Start that, and then we can go into the more interactive part.
So participants are unmuted, or they can chat right now.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to start high level, and we're going to talk about the fact that professional boundaries are a crucial aspect in any professional relationship with clients that we serve. Boundaries are crucial because they set the structure for the relationship, and they help us to have a consistent framework for the professional relationship that we are in. Now, some boundary lines are very clear. All professionals, and I'm sure everybody here would agree that it's unethical and we would not be. We all know that, that's a given. But it's the smaller boundaries, the less tangible boundaries that maybe give us a little bit of question or perhaps pose problems. For example, here's just a few questions to think about. Should a professional who runs into a client at a restaurant or a party or a local gym engage in social chit-chat with that person? Or should they pretend they don't know the person and ignore them or avoid them? Can a client and a worker serve on the same school board together or the same charity committee together without distorting their professional relationship? Should a client who has worked for years in her counseling sessions to be able to sustain a romantic relationship, when it comes time for her to get married, should she expect her therapist to attend her wedding? Can a worker give a compassionate hug to a client, particularly after a painful meeting or session? Now, I'm not going to answer those questions because I think that the answers to those will be situation specific in many cases, but I think it's important for all of us to think through how would we handle those kinds of situations and what are our opinions on those things. We're going to talk about the zone of helpfulness. This actually comes from the nursing world, and this is where someone has put this together and said that when we are working with clients, there is what's called a zone of helpfulness, which is a place where we are working with this person and we are being helpful to this person. So this is a continuum, and you can see the continuum lines there. At one extreme, there is under-involved. That might mean distancing, it might mean disinterest in the person, it might mean neglect. But at the other extreme is over-involved. And when there's over-involvement, we're probably doing too much for the client, or we're enmeshed with the client. Both of those extremes can be detrimental, particularly if you sit in one of those extremes for a long period of time. Now, in a crisis situation, there may be a time when you might become over-involved very temporarily and very intentionally to assist a client through a major crisis. But as soon as that crisis is over, you should be moving back into the zone of helpfulness. There aren't really definite lines that say this is helpful and this is over-involved or this is under-involved, because it's a gradual continuum. And sometimes we do move a little closer to one extreme or the other, and that's okay as long as we know why we're doing that and as long as we know that it's for a period of time, and then we move back into the zone of helpfulness. Sometimes we can fall into not realizing that we've moved to one of the extremes because we're tired or we're overwhelmed with a situation or we're preoccupied with something else. And so then it's about us, it's not really about the client. Sometimes if we're just not careful, we can slip into one extreme or the other without realizing that we've done that. And as soon as we do realize we've done it, we need to move back into what is more helpful. So professional boundaries are clearly established limits. They allow for safe connections between the service provider and the people receiving that service. Professional boundaries help us in hanging on to the fact that we need to be with the client and not become the client. So there is a distinction between us and the client. Boundaries help us to be friendly, but not necessarily friends with the client. They help us to define who we are, where we end, and where the client begins. So to keep those roles distinctly different from each other. And they help us with understanding the limits and the responsibilities of the role that we're in, the work that we do, the services that we can provide, and the services that we can't provide. So they help us to clearly understand our role as a service provider and what we can and can't do. And they also help the client to understand those things as well. Boundaries are important for a number of reasons, and here's just a few of them. The first one is role modeling. When we engage in healthy boundaries, we help the client to understand, here's how you interact in this kind of relationship or in this kind of a setting. So if we don't keep our own boundaries, have our own boundaries in place, then the clients are not going to learn from us how to do that. So we are modeling how to have good boundaries. So an example of that would be if you have established that you are going to meet with a client at a certain time for a certain number of minutes, then you stick within that time frame so that they know that that's the time frame that they are going to have your undivided attention. Boundaries help us to avoid the rescuer role. Sometimes, particularly those of us that work for the Salvation Army, can fall into the trap of wanting to fix everything and wanting to rescue our clients. And having proper boundaries in place and always thinking about that zone of helpfulness can help us to not fall into the rescuer role and not feel like we have to fix everything for the clients all at once. Boundaries can help us to stay focused. They help us to have a structure around which to provide the service that we provide. So if we know, for example, that during the time that I'm with this person, here are the things that are going to happen, and there's a structure to that, that boundary helps us to stay focused to make sure we're using our time to the best advantage, and also that the client knows what to expect when they come in for an appointment with us. Boundaries help us to avoid burnout or to avoid compassion fatigue. We stick within the boundaries that we have set. We are going to have a tool to minimize us becoming burnt out or suffering with compassion fatigue. Boundaries help us to have a functioning team and a functioning workplace. If you're working in conjunction with other service providers, whether on your team or external, maintaining a healthy, open, and communicating and functioning team is critically important so that you're all on the same page with dealing with a specific client. And having boundaries is going to help you in being able to facilitate that and make sure that the team is functioning as well as you would like it to be functioning. Boundaries are important for safety. If we engage in good boundary practices, we help to keep both ourselves and our clients physically and emotionally safe, which also ties into the burnout issue as well. So if we don't have good boundaries, here are some of the consequences that can happen. We talked about this a little bit already, compassion fatigue. So it might be that if you don't have good boundaries, you might get to the point where you feel like you can't sustain the role of service provider because you're exhausted. You might find that if you don't have good boundary practices, that teamwork relationships suffer. It's important that everyone is on the same team, that everyone is providing the same amount of service and the same kind of service. We do have some clients who will choose to play one person against the other. And if you have good boundaries, then that tactic that they're trying won't work because you will all be on the same page. Some of you are smiling, so I know that you're relating to that situation. If we don't have good boundaries, then a client may not be well served by what we're trying to do with them. They may not get appropriate services. They may not get helpful services. And that could affect his or her willingness to accept future services, either from us or from someone else. I've certainly experienced clients who have said, well, I saw a counselor in the past and it wasn't helpful to me for whatever reason, so I'm a little dubious about whether this is going to be helpful. And so they're not entirely engaged in the process because of past experience. So it can affect that. A client might feel betrayed or abandoned if we don't have good boundaries. And that may happen if, let's say, we don't keep to our own boundaries and we provide a service to them that maybe we're not supposed to be providing to them, and then all of a sudden we stop doing that. That person can feel betrayed or abandoned. Another consequence is that we might behave unethically. Most of us, if we're going to behave unethically, it's usually in the lower or smaller end of the unethical continuum. But boundaries, if we don't maintain good boundaries, we might find ourselves doing something that maybe isn't quite as clean ethically as it might be. And that might result in a loss of reputation, either for us personally or for the organization that we work for, because clients may go away and say, well, when I was receiving service at the Salvation Army, this is what happened, and that it wasn't a good experience. So then the opinion of other professionals in the community about the services that we offer may suffer a loss of reputation as well. Or we personally can also have that. And lastly, if we don't have good boundaries, we may put ourselves into physical or emotional danger by not having good boundaries. Okay, this would be a good time, I think, if there's questions that we can chat about before we go into looking at some of the examples.
So if you have any questions, you can type that in the Zoom group chat area. So you'll have a bar on the bottom, it'll say chat, and you can ask Major Catherine any questions that you might have about this so far. So far, no questions.
No questions.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everybody's on board.
All right. Okay. So I'm gonna read you a bunch of examples, and I want you to tell me. And Peter, we might need to unmute everybody for this.
I'm gonna unmute them now. Hang on.
So I'm gonna read some examples of things that might happen. Now, some of these might be a little far-fetched, or maybe not relevant to your situation. This is a list of things that come from a variety of different professional relationships. And I'm gonna read it, and I want you to tell me, is it acceptable to do this? Is it not acceptable to do this? Or is it maybe acceptable? So the first one, the worker lends a book to a client.
Feel free to speak. Or type.
Yeah, if you don't have a mic, you'll have to type. What do you think? Is it okay for a worker to?
Colleen states that would be fine. Joanne says depends on the book.
Yeah. Okay. I think generally speaking, it's probably okay. But I think you're right. It depends on the book. So if it's a book that's going to be helpful to the person, then that's probably an okay thing to do.
Nadine adds, as long as you don't expect it to be returned.
Well, yeah, that's another issue too. The last time I presented this, somebody said sharing 40 Shades of Grey is probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one. So a worker extends a session when a client is particularly distraught and no one else is waiting. What do we think?
I got Joanne says yes. You can speak. A few of you have got mics. Duna says acceptable. All right, I'll start calling you out. Kelly says yes.
I would say within reason.
And who's that?
Emily.
Emily. Good. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you for
Emily, how would you determine if it was appropriate or not?
I think if they're in crisis, I can see I wouldn't want to send them away really upset. So I would want to give them a bit of extra time, but I wouldn't want to go so far beyond the boundaries of the time established to meet with them that they would expect that I would do that every time.
Okay, yeah. I think that's the danger, is when you do it once, the expectation might be that it happens again and again and again, that the client may come to expect that. I think it's probably acceptable in certain circumstances on a very limited basis. But I think we just have to be careful, because we don't want to set up the expectation that if I tell you something terrible in the last 5 minutes of our meeting, you're going to give me more time. Because we do have some people who will do that. Certainly, I mean, I work with counseling. We do have clients who will save their very big stories for the last 10 minutes of the session, expecting that we're going to spend more time with them. So we have to get people out of that habit. Okay, meetings take place at regular times.
Can hear the typing.
I can hear typing, yes.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Meetings take place at regular times.
So I'll get some background noise here. I'm not sure where it's from, but we're getting Taylor says yes. Colleen has shared yes. Kelly says yes. Joanne says structure is good, but not too structured. Not to allow flexibility. Not to allow flexibility is required. I'm not sure if I'm reading that right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was a comment, which I'll come back to, previous question when I get a moment, from Nadine.
Okay.
So.
All right. Do you want to do that now?
Sure. Nadine, just as you ended your last scenario, added in, many times that is the case here. And Nadine is in Kitchener-Waterloo. And she says, depends on our situation. Most of our clients do come in some form of crisis or another. And clients are made aware of our time limits. And depending on how severe the situation, it may need another appointment or to see the ED.
Right.
So
yeah, and that sounds good. That sounds good. I mean, in my setting, I've told my counselors that, you know, if somebody tells you in the last 5 minutes that they're thinking of committing suicide, you're probably going to have to extend the session for an issue like that that could be life-threatening or very dangerous. But most other issues can wait. And you can develop the ability to say to somebody, you know what, that's a really important thing that you've just brought up, a really important topic, and I want us to have an extended period of time to talk about that. So how about next week when we meet, we start with that topic. So that's a technique that you can maybe use to help with those kind of situations.
And for your current scenario, Nadine has also added an absolute must in order to respect all involved and to set the tone for future meetings.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Nadine.
Worker eats lunch during client meetings.
Not acceptable.
Unacceptable, is that what I heard? Yeah. Colleen says no.
Yeah. Okay.
Amanda says, I never thought this was a good idea. Kelly says no.
Yeah. Okay, I would agree. That's not usually a good idea. Client.
Yeah. And Nadine just adds, yeah, and Nadine says unacceptable, shows that you're not fully engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Client and worker attend the same large social event given by a third party.
Colleen says okay. She's a brave one. I'm waiting. Okay, Kelly says yes. Fine if not attending together, Taylor states.
Okay. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's one that you have to be cautious about. So cautious about what's the event, cautious about how am I going to interact with the client at that event, or am I going to interact with the client at that event? So I think you have to think through those things, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not necessarily something that you might have control over, because you may not even know that a client has been invited to the same thing that you've been invited to, and then suddenly you're there.
Well, we've got some more comments. I apologize if I don't pronounce your name quite right. Sidihu, I believe his team's up in northern Alberta, and he says, yes, in a small town, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Amanda goes, I would acknowledge the person so not to be unfriendly if they acknowledge me by saying hi to me. And Nadine adds, acceptable, I make eye contact with the client and let them know and let them make the next move. Some are comfortable acknowledging you, others are not.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it really should be up to the client and not up to us. Okay. I'm going to skip a few here, just move down to some. Client performs some other service for worker, such as babysitting, secretarial work, house cleaning, teaching assistance.
Taylor says, never a good idea.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Not yet. Unacceptable.
Okay. I would agree.
Not good. Not good. No. Yeah, there we go. Short and sweet.
I would agree that that's not a good idea. Now, the only one there that might be an iffy thing would be teaching assistants, in the context of if you were, say, facilitating a workshop and the client had some particular experience with that workshop or something, you might do something with that. But that would be the only one there that I would think might be a maybe. Client goes into business with their worker.
No, 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 no. Wow.
Okay, good.
No.
That's a no.
Never. In caps.
Okay, good. Yeah, that one never works out well. Worker offers the client a hug at the end of a meeting.
This has happened to me, shares Amanda. Many times here, actually. Yes, from Duna. Not in my comfort zone, adds Joanne. Okay. I do have guests ask first, says Colleen, if clients offer maybe. So I would never do that in a private office setting, says Amanda.
Good.
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Good for
So that's one that is a maybe. And I think it depends on the circumstances, and it depends on, I guess, specific individual clients. Some might be okay with that, some might not be. Your own personal comfort level with that. The counseling world has kind of waffled on whether physical touch is okay or not. And we have to obviously make sure that it can't be misconstrued as sexual in any way. So we would want to be very careful if we were going to do that.
Nadine offers, not typically, however, depends on the relationship and the circumstances.
Yeah.
Taylor says, I encourage a handshake, side hug, if not able to avoid.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
How about the worker setting up the client on a blind date?
No, never, no, no.
Okay.
Now I'm waiting for some good ones here. Way too personal.
Yeah. Not the service that we provide. Okay.
Nadine offers, not on my watch.
Worker regularly takes phone calls during the client session.
Never. No. No. Maybe.
Tell me about maybe.
This is Duna.
When would that be okay?
Okay, let's see. She's typing. It depends if an emergency.
Okay.
Amanda says, I do not do this unless it's unavoidable, and she does agree with Joanne's if it's an emergency. I have the instruction to take calls because of the high volume, says Duna.
Okay. So I think you have to be very careful if you're going to take calls during a session with a client, because it can make the person feel that you are not paying attention to them, that that phone call is more important than they are. So I think generally speaking, it's not a good idea. But there may be circumstances where there might be an emergency, or there might be one scenario I've experienced on a very few occasions is where I've been playing phone tag with somebody long distance, and I knew that at some point they would probably call, hopefully not during the session, but there was a slight chance that they might, and it was an emergency situation. In that case, I would tell the client right up front, if my phone rings, I will have to take it. I am expecting an emergency call. Okay? It's like those of you who have parents, you know, if my child's school calls, I'm going to have to take that because it's potentially an emergency call. But most other cases, no, we would not do that.
Kelly offers if it relates to the client and situation.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Emily offers, I agree, sometimes it is an emergency in very rare incidences. And Nadine offers, no, again, shows disengagement. Only if you have expressed there may be a call coming in, so it may be expected, as you have said, Catherine. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here, we'll just do one last one here. Worker conducts meetings over the telephone when a client is out of town.
I think you're typing. We've had some great discussion here. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
You have good ideas.
Okay, here we go. Okay, if needed, maybe. The only time we do something like this is for emergency service and transients.
Okay. Yeah.
If that has been prearranged and is accepted by all involved, possibility depends on issue and client.
Okay. So it's the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be extenuating circumstances where we might do that, but for the most part, that's not something that we do.
I hear some comment, but I can't quite hear it. Are you able to share that again? Okay. Carry on. Or type it. Type it if your volume's not working.
Okay, so I want us to go on to a scenario. I'm going to put it up on the screen. And I want you to read the scenario. And then let's have some discussion about this scenario and the boundary issues that exist in this scenario.
As everyone's reading that and thinking about that, I'll just share Emily's chat. She said, with the last scenario that you shared, Major, she said it's appropriate. We often work on an outreach basis with our clients, and phone support is a great opportunity to connect with a client who may be otherwise unable to meet in person for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it may just be that may be situation specific as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you want to avoid there is a client who always wants to have phone support rather than coming into the office.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see as the potential issues in this scenario?
You can type that if you'd like, and we'll share it. If you have mics, you're still unmiked, so you can vocalize that and share it. Okay, we've got our first comment. Claudia is letting her personal opinion cloud her judgment of how to handle the situation. Another thought is Claudia is imposing her values, i.e. feminist, on client, not a good idea. And then we have, she get herself into a lot of hot water. And then we have another comment. It is not up to Claudia to impose her beliefs / opinions on Sarah. Nope.
Okay.
And Colleen says, I agree.
I also agree with all of those comments that Claudia's got some issues here, I think. I suspect that Claudia, certainly she doesn't have very good boundaries in this situation. So this would make me wonder whether Claudia has some personal issues of her own that she needs to work through in order to be able to provide better care for her clients. The thing is, though, Claudia might be doing this thinking that she's doing a good thing. But you can see from the result that it ends up that the client stops coming. So the client is not interpreting this as a good thing. The other issue to look at, I think, in this is that what they're supposed to be doing together is working on vocational training and financial planning. Truly has nothing to do with the boyfriend and whether or not Sarah's going to be with this person. So it would make me question, why is Claudia even getting into that kind of a discussion with her? What else do you think about this? Anything else that anyone sees?
We've got a couple more comments.
Uh-huh.
Claudia should refer her and Eddie to counseling or parenting programs, not provide her personal opinion. That was Taylor. And then we've got Emily sharing, Claudia did not meet the client where the client was at. Claudia failed to take a client-centered approach and allowed her own biases to impact her relationship and rapport with the client and fell out of the scope of her work with the client. Wow.
Right. Yeah, that's a great answer. So yeah, she didn't stick within the boundaries of what she was supposed to be doing. She let her own personal stuff get in the way. Even if she might have thought that she was doing that to give Sarah some good information, she let her own views and values get in the way. She wasn't client-centered. She can't predict the future either, although she's trying to in that case. That was a great response. What do you think that Claudia's supervisor should do about this situation?
I can hear typing. No comments yet. Oh, so we got our first one. Okay, some coaching on working on goals with clients and not sidetracking. As well as, oh, now they're coming in. Several, gotta keep up with this. Several options. Sorry, gotta come back up. Assign a new worker to Sarah and speak with Sarah. I think they mean Claudia. Oh, no, with Sarah, gotcha. Go over boundaries is another suggestion. Have a conversation with Claudia about boundaries and how to deal with the situation in the future. He/she, I guess the supervisor, should talk with Claudia, ensure that she understands how to approach difficult situations like this without getting too emotionally involved.
Okay, good.
Thank you, folks. That's great. I love that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Anything else anyone sees in this that we haven't mentioned already?
Oh, follow-up call with Sarah as she has missed appointments.
Okay. All right. And you think the supervisor should do that or Claudia should do that?
No response.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask a different question with that. So let's say there is not the option of assigning another worker. Let's say Claudia is it. She's the only worker that can be assigned to this client. What do you think could happen to repair the damage that's done?
We've got comments now. We've got Claudia, as she is she has to hand Sarah over to a new worker to maintain professionalism.
Okay.
Another one is if positive coaching with Claudia, then okay, or supervisor. Claudia should reach out first. If unable to work with the client or resolve issues, the supervisor should be on hand for added support for the client. And then we've got apologies as another suggestion.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the best scenario, if it works in the situation, would be for a new caseworker to be assigned to this case, and then the supervisor can do some coaching with Claudia and telling her how she can handle situations like this in the future and what the expectations are of her position, because it seems like she's strayed outside of the expectations of the position as well. So there would be some employment supervision that would need to happen around that. There may also be some things that Claudia has to take care of in her own life because she's got very, very strong opinions about this. And while those opinions are not a bad thing necessarily, when they get in the way of the work that we're doing, that sometimes means that there's something personal that we have to work through ourselves. So that would be something that maybe she might consider doing. But if there is no other caseworker, and if Claudia is the only person that's available to work with Sarah, then I think apologies might be a good thing. And it might be that the supervisor might have to step in there and say, and call Sarah and say, would you be willing to meet with Claudia and myself? And then perhaps facilitate that kind of a discussion where Claudia could say, it was inappropriate for me to share my own viewpoints on that, and I'm really sorry. Will you accept my apology? Can we go on from here and see if it's possible to repair that relationship? If it's not possible, it could be that Sarah might need to be referred elsewhere. Those would be my thoughts about that issue.
We've got a great little discussion going on here in our chat.
Okay.
The suggestion was Claudia needs to apologize to Sarah for her personal opinion and build that trust again. And then goes on to say, maybe include Eddie. And then another chat came in that says, I wouldn't include Eddie because I think legally speaking, that would become a potential problem. So there's some great dialogue going on there, and I'll throw it to you, Major Catherine.
Okay. So whoever said that they would include Eddie, tell me why you might include Eddie.
This is safe ground, folks.
Well, it's not necessarily wrong. It's I'm just curious as to
there's some thinking
why
here.
you might do that.
Can you hear me if I speak? Hello?
Hello? I can hear you.
Me?
Yes.
laptop is kind of over to the side, so it's never always there. So I set up that including Eddie might be a problem, possibly, because in situations here where you have distraught people come in and they're in broken relationships and they talk about their spouse or their ex-spouse. But I always felt that if they're talking about somebody who hasn't given consent to be talked about, could be dangerous for him by including them possibly.
Okay. I think that if you're going to make a decision to include Eddie in this kind of a situation, I think that you, the worker, would have to have some skills in being able to handle couples and potentially couples in conflict. So if you have counseling skills that extend to you being able to work with couples who might be in a conflict.
Nadine replied, if he's becoming part of Sarah and the children's lives, to see how he's going to be a part of their lives and how he will contribute, help with accountability on all levels. So I think that's the response to why including Eddie. Oh, we've lost you, Catherine. What happened with you? Catherine, your volume. What has happened with you? You've lost Catherine. Can you unmute? Unmute. Try again, Catherine. Nope. Can you check your settings? Okay, try again, Catherine. No. Wow. We've lost Catherine. I am not sure why. I'm going to try. Okay, try again. We've totally lost your volume, Catherine. Okay. And I don't know why. You were... Okay, try again, Catherine. No. I've lost you. Technology, folks, it's great when it works, isn't it? I'm not sure how to fix this, so we've lost. All right. How about you put up the slides, Catherine, and we'll maybe be able to finish with some of your points. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. At least we might be able to put up some of your main points. And so, and if you'd like, you might, Catherine, are you able to chat? You see the chat area and maybe just point your points. Yeah, you've lost. Wow. This is her last slide. And she's, if you just want to go back to your last 4 points and I'll just review them. Yeah, she says 4 guidelines to remember. And so the great thing about technology is, folks, I can tell you this is being recorded and we will have Catherine's notes, her PowerPoint slides available probably be within the next week or so. Any last thoughts you want to share with us, Major? Via the chat line? Yes, these are general guidelines that will help you maintain good boundaries. So, well, folks, technology is wonderful. I want to thank Major Catherine Skillen for having fun with us in the last few minutes and being a good sport about technology. She is a phenomenal resource. I'm not sure if she would like me to give out all her, there we go. There you go. So she states, if you have any questions in the future, she's very happy. Please feel free to contact her. She's at the Erin Mills Women's Counseling Center. I had the pleasure of visiting her one day there, and it's a fantastic, highly awarded facility. And so she's doing great work with her staff, and she's a fantastic resource. So if you're on Lotus Notes, Catherine_Skillen will get you to her and all the particulars. So we'll say goodbye to Catherine, and I know she's got to get some lunch before she starts counseling again. So we'll all wave and we'll wish her well, and we'll try sign language next time. Thank you, Major. I appreciate this so much. Okay, so you can click yourself off. Bye-bye. All right, folks, I want to just remind you that any questions, you can certainly forward them to me. I am hoping that within the next week or so, I'll be able to get Major Catherine's PowerPoint slides out to you. This is just one of many things that we're working on here in Core Ministries. And so if you have any questions, please email them, peter_thomas@can.salvationarmy. But also, I'm looking forward to your suggestions. This is our second in our series of timeout webinars to give you a chance to gather, to hopefully be encouraged, feel supported, and hopefully raise the bar for our ministries in our centers across the territory. Because you've been so patient and we have a little time, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what's coming in the new year. January, we will have Jessica McKeechee coming. We will have Michelle Weeks. Jessica will be bringing a section on justice. Michelle Weeks will be talking about volunteer management. We'll have Sherry Russell bringing some Indigenous focus to our work. And so those are just a few teasers for you to be watching out for in the coming year. I'm waiting for November's to confirm, but I will tell you I'm hoping it'll help you as you enter the Christmas season. So again, I want to encourage you in your ministries just to continue to work on things like care, developing your community, producing real significant change, and bringing hope today. My pleasure to meet with you, and if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I've got a question from Colleen before I sign you off. There was a webinar about the new waivers also taped. I just learned about it. Yes, Colleen, there was a series of webinars a couple of weeks ago on our new consent form to replace the waiver in CMS. And we have some new authorization forms. The session didn't get taped as well as it should have been. And so we are actually going to re-record it, Lynn and myself, and we'll have that out to you soon. If you need the forms, I have draft copies. They're only draft, but send me an email and I'll walk you through some of that just so that you can start using these new consent forms. The previous waiver in CMS did not meet Canadian privacy laws, and that's why we addressed that. So if you have questions about that, give me a phone call, and I thank you all as well. Have a great morning, afternoon, and Lord bless you in your ministries. Take care. Thank you.